great idea. It would be a genuinely great idea. Yes. Okay, so haunted matcha, obviously there would need to be training for this, but why not? Why not? There's more. If only we had physical locations all across Canada where we could set up EV charging stations. Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be just so freaking cool to set up EV charging stations around the country at post offices? Like, with more post offices than there are Tim Hortons in the country, we can help pave the way for more electrification by installing public charging stations at every Canada post office. It would be so easy. The locations are already there. They're already there. This is just another incredible opportunity to improve the service delivery and to make Canada Post more relevant to the 21st century. And they envision post offices as community hubs, organizing things like farmers markets and community events and pop-up spaces. They want to make post offices pillars of the community. And if not them, then who? The post office is one of those important points of contact between the public and the government, and this could be so freaking good. They want to electrify the buildings with solar panels. They want to expand the use of Canada Post as a consolidated last-mile delivery to ease congestion and pollution, and they want to use more union-made electric vehicles. Like, friends, there are real ideas here. Cup W is coming forward and saying this is how we can save. So true, libraries have an important role too. But this is Cup W saying we have a path forward. And this is, you've got the government basically saying, you know, we can't do this stuff. We got to phase out so many different services and reduce our services in order to get them to financial sustainability. When in reality, they could just get a cash injection from the government. The government could up their funding, because the reason why they can't do a lot of this stuff at present is because they don't have the funding to do it. There are just so many opportunities here, and this plan addresses so many things. But you've got the government or the leadership, essentially, trying to undermine and force a strike by making some unilateral changes to a bunch of different rules here, because the existing collective agreements expire in 2022. Or in May 22nd of 2025. So the corporation will be in legal position to introduce new terms and conditions of employment for all Cup W represented employees in the urban bargaining unit. Canada Post could also adjust its operations as allowed under the labor code based on operational realities and business needs. This means that they could pay employees for actual amount of time worked. They could cancel additional allowances. They could cut overtime rates, cancel all vacation leave, require management approval for leaves, make all union leave unpaid, consider any period of time that employees are not working during labor disruption as non-pensionable time, discontinuing benefits, discontinuing short-term disability. Friends, they are trying to force a strike. And so what you have is a government saying that Canada Post isn't viable while refusing. They're saying Canada Post isn't viable while holding the purse strings. Where does it say that Canada Post needs to be run as a profitable business? Where does it say that? We can change this. We can reframe Canada Post as a service rather than a for-profit business. And this is just neoliberalism eating public service. It's not making money, so we don't need it, clearly, instead of reimagining what it could be, right? Because neoliberalism has a lot of trouble imagining new systems or new approaches to dealing with problems. What they do instead is try to sustain existing systems while letting them wither, while letting them erode. So it is a business and it isn't. It's a crown corp, right? But crown corporations don't necessarily need to be run for profit. There are a lot of ways to run a crown corporation. Like CBC gets public funding, but we expect, Canada Post to figure it out for themselves. Yeah, it's that the federal government directs them to be profitable. So, friends, a reminder. Here in this stream, here in this space, we stand with workers, we stand with Cup W, and we stand with their strike demands. So when you see those strikers on the picket line this weekend, give them a little love. Drop off a coffee if you can. We stand in solidarity with our fellow workers, my friends. Because whatever workers are making, the answer is not enough. And however worker conditions are, the answer is they should be better. And oh my goodness, yes, under no circumstances cross the picket line. Under no circumstances. Because worker power is people power, my friends. Worker power is people power. And every time that workers strike, they get the same sort of... I've never heard of Jack London's Scab poem. Ode to a Scab. Oh, I'm intrigued. So for those who don't know, a scab is somebody who crosses picket lines to work for the employer to help them break a strike. Oh my. I've never read this. Ode to a Scab. After God finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful substance left with which he made a scab. A scab is a two-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a waterlogged brain, and a combination backbone made of jelly and glue. Where others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. When a scab walks down the street, men turn their backs, and angels weep in heaven, and the devil shuts the gates of hell to keep him out. No man has a right to scab as long as there is a pool of water deep enough to oh my. We'll let you read that one yourself. Or a rope. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one too. Judas Iscariot was a gentleman compared with a scab. For betraying his master, he had character enough. Oh, yeah, we're going to skip that too. Esau sold his birthright. Judas Iscariot sold his savior for 30 pieces of silver. Benedict Arnold sold his country for a promise of commission in the British Army. The modern strikebreaker sells his birthright, his country, his wife, his children, and his fellow man for an unfulfilled promise from his employer, trust, or corporation. Solidarity wins. Written in this was... I don't know when this was written specifically, but holy smokes. Jack London, 1904 wrote that apparently. Not playing around. 1903, actually. Insulting to snakes, toads, and vampires. So yeah, stand with workers, my friends. Stand with workers. Take care of yourselves, folks.
For an international superstar band over to running for Congress now in California's 41st. What was that evolution like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in Corona, California, in the district, and my dad's a pastor, so I watched him serve people. I played in punk bands, and then later started the band One Republic and got to tour the country, meet all sorts of folks. But one of the things I saw really early on, working in One Republic, but also working with artists like Kesha and Katy Perry and others, is that songwriters and artists, they get screwed over by major record labels and corporations. So I started my own label, and the goal was to give back to artists and make sure that they're able to get their fair shake and have good deals, instead of these predatory deals that record labels do. So started my label, and it blossomed into this huge thing, and hundreds of artists were able to be able to buy homes and make a living doing music. So now I'm running for Congress, for a similar thing. People can't afford to buy homes here in California and across the nation. And so I'm excited to shake things up and make some major change here.
And so, how are you going to leverage your past? Obviously, it's much different than what Democrats usually have, and it kind of fills this weird void that we have, where Democrats have largely ceded culture to the right over the last election cycle or so, and so this kind of offers a way back in, at least for your race in particular. And so, how are you going to leverage that moving forward into 2026?
100%. I mean, we're seeing like a major movement right now. We've seen thousands and thousands of grassroots people just give to this campaign. And a lot of it's that, I grew up working class. I was a janitor, I was a barista at one point. And, people are really angry right now at politicians in general. It's both sides of the aisle. And so, as an outsider, as somebody that's not the establishment, that message is really, really resonating with people right now. And we just did a town hall, this weekend with 400 people, and people are showing up all over the district right now. It's exciting.
Are your former bandmates supportive of the effort here?
They are. They are. It's been so nice. Like Ryan in particular was extremely supportive. So it's nice, to get that support and the support from the music industry. Like there's been this huge outpouring from the music industry, and to me that touches my heart, more than the $3,500 check, which is the max. Like the
Yeah.
artist giving $10, $20 to the campaign when I know they're really working hard to earn that kind of money. So
We obviously have seen this district pose something of a headache for Democrats in the past. Will Rollins ran in California's 41st for the last two election cycles, came really close to unseating Ken Calvert, but that district has been a thorn in our sides, which is ironic because it includes cities like Palm Springs, which are obviously
yeah.
very liberal bastions, but it's offset by these other very conservative parts of Riverside County. And so, how will your campaign be different from these previous campaigns with other strong candidates like Will Rollins?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Will, and he's a good friend, and I gave to his campaign as well. And literally a week after he after that election, we were talking about how can we flip this seat. And a lot of it, talking to everybody is it's Corona. Corona is the biggest city in the district,
Yeah.
and just being born and raised there, it's very, very working class, and a lot of these people are moderates and they're easily swayed. And so I think, being able to reach them, connect with them, speak their language, and that's one of the assets I have is, just being from there, being born and raised, and being able to kind of speak their language. So.
And in terms of the actual issues, because look, Ken Calvert to a degree is probably going to be able to speak their language in the sense that he's gotten elected there
Right.
for God knows how many cycles. I don't think since I've been in politics, Ken Calvert hasn't been in Congress, and so in terms of the issues themselves, where do you stand? That's going to help win over those folks in the Corona areas of your district.
Well, first off, just I'm going to politely disagree. I don't think Ken Calvert speaks their language at all. When I was 8 years old at Lincoln Elementary School, he became my congressman, and
Yeah.
32 years later, he's still there. He hasn't shown up to a town hall in years because he's scared. He, voted against same-sex marriage. He voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The guy's, the furthest right you can imagine,
Yeah.
and that is not what the people of Corona and especially Palm Springs align with. And it's insane that he's been there for so long. So, I have no doubt there's a movement happening in 2026. Hands down, we're going to be able to flip the seat.
And so going back to the initial question,
Yeah,
like in
yeah,
terms of the actual issues, like what is your campaign going to be focused on? What moves you in
absolutely.
politics?
Yeah, so affordable housing, things are just completely unaffordable right now. People are leaving the state right now for Austin and Nashville,
Yeah.
but it's throughout the country. So I'm for a $25,000 tax credit to first time home buyers. Climate change has been a huge thing. We've seen wildfire after wildfire, and San Bernardino and Riverside County are two of the most polluted counties in the country. So we need some major, major change there. And then crime and homelessness right now is a huge thing here in California. So I have no doubt we're going to be able to fix these things, and I'm really, really excited about making these changes.
There have been a lot of discussions about the abundance agenda as the result of Ezra Klein's book, and so I'm curious where you stand on this idea that that there are a lot of well-meaning regulations on the book, but in aggregate, the practical effect of having all of these regulations is that there is so much red tape that just compounds year over year over year. Again, each one individually, which may have been well-meaning, but in aggregate creates such an obstacle and such a time suck and such a money pit for developers who actually want to build these houses that it's kind of no wonder we're not able to do this in any way that's quick or cost effective. You look at a big example, of course, is high speed rail, or our inability to complete high speed rail. In this state that beats its chest as a beacon of innovation. We can't even build a fucking train.
It's
but
crazy.
I'm
It's
curious
crazy.
where you stand on this issue as it relates. If something that really drives you is housing, how do we fix that here in California?
I mean, there's multiple layers, and yes, regulations. There's been too many regulations, but at the same time, it's nuanced because we need those regulations. But some of the ideas that I have that are outside of the box is, our state land. We have 4 million acres of state land here in California that's being unused. We could use that land to build affordable housing. A lot of this land, too, is around schools. And teachers right now in California are driving Ubers. They have side gigs. This shouldn't be happening,
Yeah.
And we could build housing on near school land so that teachers can live there. Also, with this land, we could, build solar panels and go fully solar here in California. There's a lot of things we could do. We also have tons of government buildings that are completely empty, and let's transform those into affordable housing. There's a lot of things we can do. I feel like the regulation here, talking about the high speed rail, we've seen time and time again in California where consultants and special interest groups get kickbacks, and that's why we're seeing all this money being poured into this, but no rail being laid and things like that. So there's corruption on both sides, and we need to clean that up and get some of these folks out of there and new people in there that are for the working class people.
In terms of Ken Calvert's continued presence in Congress, what do you say to folks who, for whom voting for Ken Calvert, voting Republican, has become a major component of their identity? And so, it's not as easy as just, for some of these people who have viewed themselves as Republicans their entire lives, it's not as easy as just saying, hey, don't vote Republican anymore. It's something that they might hold dear. And so in the instance with Ken Calvert, how do you move those people who may have voted for him election cycle after election cycle since we were both kids? How do you move
Yeah.
them away from Ken Calvert and open them up to voting for a different party, a party that may for their entire lives have been antithetical to their own identity?
I mean, we're already seeing that. On Easter, it was wild. I got a text from a friend, and she's like, "I'm here with 30 of my family members. All of them are Republican. They've never voted for a Democrat in their life, and they're going to vote for you." And I was like, "Why?" And they're like, "It's because you speak their language. They know you're working class. They knew you growing up. They
Yeah.
know that you mowed the lawns, you were the janitor, you were the barista, you worked your butt off, and you care about the people here." And, people at the end of the day just want to know that they're being taken care of. I'm completely anti-Trump, anti-Elon. I think the great orange man is the worst president we've ever had. However, when he ran, he spoke to the working class. There was something about his message that resonated, and AOC does the same thing. She's on the far left, but her working class message really resonates with people. And these are people that just want to know they're going to have somebody that's representing them and they're being taken care of. So I think at the end of the day, it's just about representing people and speaking their language.
Tim, how can we help your campaign?
Well, if you could go to timmyersforcongress.com, and if you want to give, we would absolutely be honored if you would do that. And also, if you want to sign up to volunteer in the district and go canvassing with us, that would be huge.
Well, I know that we have a big audience that's listening out here in California. We have a big national audience, of course, and for anybody who's looking to give, highly recommend that you give because this is a really important district. But especially folks in California, who may feel like we live in this big blue liberal bastion and there's really nothing that we could do on the ground. This is one of the most flippable districts in the entire country. It is a main target, probably top three most flippable in the entire United States. So highly recommend if you're in the area, head over to Tim's website and see what we can do to help. And if you don't live in the area, of course, any way that you can help in terms of contributions is also welcome. Tim, appreciate
Really
your
appreciate
time
that.
today,
Yeah, thank
and
you.
best of luck in the campaign trail.
Thank you. It was so great talking with you. Thank you.
All right, breaking news. I'm starting to wonder if Trump's style of quote unquote diplomacy doesn't work because Greenland just decided to push the US away even further. Now, let me remind you, Trump sent both J.D. Vance and Don Jr. and even Charlie Kirk on some weird royal-esque mission to Greenland. It's almost like the king trying to send his firstborn son to conquer a new land, except the firstborn son is like Beavis, and then he sent J.D. Vance as Butthead, and they failed. They failed miserably because Greenland has officially signed a new minerals deal, but not with the US, not with any of our immediate neighbors or allies, but they very intentionally subverted the US's wishes and decided to, say no. No, Trump, you're not going to bully us. You're not going to put out all of these like weird proposals that are one-sided. You're not going to invade us and not rule out military force. It's all incredibly absurd, but let's jump in to how we got here. First, I got this comment. You've earned my sub, Adam. Keep telling the truth. That means more than you know. If you want to join the crew, make sure you scroll down and hit the subscribe button. Okay, just to begin, there's this new theory. There's this new worry among world leaders that Trump brings them into the Oval Office just to have a quote-unquote televised WWE SmackDown. Now, this isn't really like a theory. We've seen it happen with Zelensky. We saw it happen with Ramaphosa yesterday. But the worst part is, it's all pretty bad. The worst part is, Trump disrespects the hell out of world leaders, but the disrespect isn't even based in reality. For example, this article reads, "It's the new Hunger Games of world politics, a televised Oval Office takedown by Trump, but you can hardly call it a takedown because yesterday, the South African president was the latest leader to become a MAGA prop as Trump lectured him on false, conspiratorial claims that white South African farmers are being genocided. And then a few months back, Zelensky had to get yelled at because of false, unsubstantiated conspiracy theories that Trump has eaten up. Our old, demented ass president goes into the Oval Office and just yells at world leaders for no reason whatsoever. Why don't you yell at the world leaders who deserve it? Why don't you bring Putin in the Oval Office? Like, you know what? I'm going to say this right now. When Trump and Putin inevitably have another face-to-face meeting, Trump's not going to bully him or yell at him or be mean whatsoever. It is going to be very, very cordial. The same thing with Xi Jinping. Trump only demeans leaders that he views as lesser because he's a very transactional, malignant narcissist. But going back to this, Greenland signs lucrative mineral deal with Europe in a blow to Trump. Remember when J.D. Vance very awkwardly visited? This clip alone probably got them to push the United States away. Take a look.
How we doing? It's cold as here. Nobody told me. Well, thank you all for everything you do, and thanks for having us. So please sit down, guys. Please. I want you to eat your food. Usha and I are thrilled to be here. It's a really beautiful flight, actually. You fly over some pretty cool spots. I've never been to Greenland. Apparently, I'm the first vice president to ever visit Greenland, so that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, because they're making an intentional move to prime the citizens of Greenland and also not even rule out military force. It's not diplomacy whatsoever. The Trump admin way over-postured on Greenland. They way overplayed their hand. Trump threatened them, bullied them, wouldn't rule out military force, but never actually proposed any substantial U.S. investment. No formal cooperation or proposals, no actual money that he flaunted, just headlines and bravado and sending his son and sending Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, European nations kept their heads down, they engaged with Greenland's laws and regulations, and they struck a deal competently. Look at how it works when you're actually diplomatic. Like, just to zoom out for a second, there is a form of diplomacy that has worked for the past 100 years, let's say, that has allowed this level of peace and prosperity since World War II. That diplomacy is like formal cooperation and laws and agreements. Trump thinks that he can go under all of that, subvert all of that, and what happens is other people beat him to the chase, because while Trump is trying to grab headlines and be this huge prick and be like an attention whore, like just dominating the attention economy, European countries are like, let's very quietly and competently try to cut a deal. Greenland has allowed a Danish-French consortium to mine a rock which is key to the production of aluminum, the rock that Trump very much so wanted. This permit granted to Greenland anorthosite mining, GAM, to extract anorthosite follows interest in the Arctic territory from U.S. President Donald Trump in acquiring the autonomous island, which is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. GAM, which is backed by French company Jean Bol Group and real estate investment firm bodies from Denmark and Greenland, was granted 30 years, a 30-year permit. A 30-year permit. The article from Reuters, the source article, says Greenland gives Danish-French group permit to mine rock with green potential in wake of Trump interest. Wild. Greenland on Wednesday handed a 30-year mining permit to this group after Trump sparked a lot of interest and sort of overplayed his hand. And that's kind of the core failure of Trump's foreign policy. I mean, there are a lot of failures. There are a lot of failures that stem from his malignant narcissism. But when your entire foreign policy is built on bluster rather than strategy, built on bluffing and setting arbitrary deadlines against yourself, saying by this date, this is going to happen, or else. And then by that date, when nothing happens, other leaders in other countries are like, oh, so this guy's full of shit. Again, the core failure of Trump's foreign policy is that it's built completely on bluster over strategy. Can I say one more time? If Trump would have wanted to strike a deal with Greenland, that's actually not even the bad part. We need to make sure we're drawing the distinction. If Trump and his team had a detailed, formal proposal that followed Greenland's laws and regulations and was respectful towards Denmark, that would be different. You know, that's what Europe just did. European countries, rather, just were very quiet and very respectful, and they cut a deal, and it was mutually beneficial. But no, Trump said he's not going to rule out military force. He said Greenland should just become a part of the USA. This is actually such a good example. This is such a prime example as to why Trump's foreign policy, or policy in general, is just awful. You can't build it off of lies and expect people to respect you. GAM was granted a 30-year permit, which is a huge blow to Trump. Zuthan, an associate professor at a university in Denmark, told Newsweek Trump's interest in Greenland's resources is likely to be more in securing long-term investment objects, which is difficult under current Greenlandic legislation. Why it matters. Greenland has sparked international attention since Trump expressed his interest, but because of Trump's bluster, they said, yo, 30-year permit goes to this French-Danish country. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Greenland is now a new front line. It's the front line battle in the global mineral race. We still have Ukraine, but Trump is dropping the ball on Ukraine as well. It's just so mind-numbing how dumb he is. Trump supporters will constantly praise Trump for thinking outside of the box, but maybe sometimes thinking inside the box is how you want to think. For example, as long as negotiation has been around, it's a game of gaining leverage over the other side. So Trump's quote-unquote thinking outside of the box is ceding every single bit of leverage that Ukraine had while blowing smoke up Putin's ass and being super friendly with Putin. That's not thinking outside the box. That's being a gullible idiot. Let's bring it back inside the box for a second and push Putin back out. Then maybe Zelensky would be more happy to cut a long-term mineral deal. He cut one recently, but Trump asked for an insanely inequitable deal, and they had to negotiate it to a more even. It's all an absolute mess. I'm sick of watching Trump's foreign policy crash and burn. And while the rest of the world is mining the future, while the rest of the world is looking towards the future, we're stuck in the past. We're stuck trying to buy things and taking bribes. And I'll leave it at that. One more time, if you want to join the crew, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. Shout out to this comment that says, "You've earned my sub, Adam. Keep telling the truth." If you want to help amplify the message, drop some blue hearts, subscribe. I love you all, and peace out.
You guys are going to put these in your backpack. We're going to teach you about it.
All right, so look, fentanyl is a real thing. If you guys are exposed to fentanyl, because there can be something that has fentanyl on it, and if you touch it, you will immediately be exposed to it.
I'm going to come straight out the gate and say that this drug does not work that way. No hate to this family. I saw their video because my mutual stitched it, and I really appreciate that they want to educate their kids and have frank conversations about substance use with them. I do find it concerning that someone who says that they are a nurse in their profile would believe a propaganda conspiracy theory that you can overdose on entanol simply by touching it, because you can't. I have made 3 videos recently in my Damsels in Distress playlist debunking this conspiracy theory about transdermal overdose from touching a laced dollar bill, a laced note, the gas station pump handle. This video, and this video.
This is from UC Davis. It is a common misconception that N-tunnel-Phe can be absorbed through the skin, but it is not true for casual exposure. You cannot overdose from it by touching a doorknob or a dollar bill. This is not the pathway through which that drug works. Shocked to hear that this urban legend originates with the cops. It's pure propaganda. One of the most famous cases is Officer Courtney Bannock. She faked passing out, said she was choking and couldn't breathe because she touched some powder that she believed was Tango and Cash. This is such a widespread moral panic that it's actually been studied. This was a really fascinating journal article. Police reports of accidental N-tunnel-Phe overdose in the field, correcting a culture-bound syndrome that harms us all.
So I highly recommend going and watching those 3 videos. I think it's super important to educate our kids about substance use, to talk to them about the dangers, the risks, to make sure that we are creating a judgment-free zone where kids feel safe talking about these issues. But we need to make sure that we're
Mark Carney has worked hard to portray himself as a politician of substance, a politician who's built different, one who's much more focused on material issues and less focused on theatrics. But that doesn't always seem to hold true, and that was most certainly the case yesterday. You see, when a prime minister or a premier comes into power, one of the first things that they'll typically do is write mandate letters to the ministers. So these are essentially just a guide for what they're supposed to be working on. And before we go any further, we probably need a little bit of context here. Historically, mandate letters have not always been public. That's a relatively new development. Generally, it's just been sort of a series of instructions that prime ministers or premiers give out to their ministers in order to direct the ministries. But Justin Trudeau really moved the idea toward a more public-facing sort of thing. It kind of turned mandate letters into PR, which is where we're at now, as the Mark Carney mandate letters are very PR focused. You see, Justin Trudeau gave extensive mandate letters. He was very focused on them as his blueprint for governing in a lot of ways. And that's why the PMO created a mandate letter tracker. It was meant to show that they were delivering for Canadians. They tracked individual commitments on the website. Worth noting, the 5 commitments that they fully abandoned included electoral reform and balancing the budget. So if you want to get a sense of just how ironclad these commitments are, the answer is not very. And mandate letters have become a bit of a point of contention, and Doug Ford has actually fought hard to not release his mandate letters. He wants to keep his plans for the government quiet. But particularly at the provincial level, it's quite common not to see the mandate letters, which has its own problems. It's a form of government transparency in some important senses, but it also brings us to a significant problem. When a government document becomes a public-facing announcement of your plans, then it begins the evolution from a governing document to a PR document. And that brings us to Mark Carney and his mandate letters. You see, at a ministerial retreat, he handed out 1 mandate letter to each of his ministers. The same mandate letter. You thought you might get 30 plus mandate letters? No, sir, you get 1, and it is limited. You see, Mark Carney is fully embracing the nature of the mandate letter as public relations. This is a comms strategy, not a governing strategy. Because the mandate letter, which is the exact same for every ministry, has just 7 points. That's it. They are Mark Carney's 7 priorities for government. So I want to take a few minutes to go through these and break them down individually, because I think it's important, even if it is just PR. PR is being used to signal the direction for the government. So let's have a look. So it starts with a bit of a preamble, talking about how we face the largest change to the international trading system since the fall of the Berlin Wall, and talks about Canada's long-standing weak productivity, which is encouraging. Work harder, peasants. Your betters need you to create value. But it talks about a fundamentally different approach to governing. It doesn't mention what it is, at least not directly, but it talks about it. It's also very clearly focused on infrastructure and significant investment in public infrastructure. Although perhaps most concerning is when he says, quote, government itself must become much more productive by deploying AI at scale and focusing on results over spending, and by using scarce tax dollars to catalyze multiples of private investment. Which sounds a heck of a lot like replacing public servants with AI. So if you've gone on a business's website and gotten stuck talking with an AI assistant, just know, soon, that could be your government. Lucky us. But then Carney lays out 7 priorities, and these priorities are the same for every ministry, so let's have a look. First up, establishing a new economic and security relationship with the United States and strengthening our collaboration with reliable trading partners and allies around the world. And fair enough, Mark Carney's been pretty direct about this. The international trade and reorganization of Canada's position in the world has been a high priority for him. It's not that surprising. Although the 1 mandate letter immediately starts to get a little bizarre here, like Adam Van Koeverden is the Secretary of State for Sport. What is he supposed to do with this? Like, it's fine, it's just not super relevant to all the ministries, which is one of the first issues with a single mandate letter. It's PR. Next up, building one Canadian economy by removing barriers to interprovincial trade and identifying and expediting nation-building projects that will connect and transform our country. And again, this is pretty much what he talked about during the election. Nothing super surprising here. However, I do think that Mark Carney's already finding more challenges to breaking down interprovincial trade barriers than he'd expected, as some of the provinces have been a little more resistant. Alberta and Saskatchewan, looking at you. Ontario's been busy signing trade deals, but a lot of the other provinces have been very protective of their individual jurisdictions, so there's a lot of work left to do here. But again, this makes sense as a priority for the ministers. But now things start to get a little vague. Bringing down costs for Canadians and helping them to get ahead. And the phrasing here is very strange to me. What does he mean by get ahead? Get ahead of whom? Like, the idea of bringing down costs for individual Canadians is a good idea, don't get me wrong. But the vagueness of this statement is a little odd, especially since it sounds like he's just going to bring down costs by magic. Without talking about how you're going to bring down costs, saying we're going to bring down costs is just sort of a vague direction-setting message. Like, this is like when you go to a meeting and people tell you that they're going to use synergy or innovation. They're just throwing out words. So bringing down costs is a good thing, but without any sort of a plan at all, this is really more of a wish. Next up, making housing more affordable by unleashing the power of public-private cooperation, catalyzing a modern housing industry and creating new careers in the skilled trades. And again, this isn't necessarily surprising. A market-based solution is what Mark Carney has always talked about. He centered his campaign around this plan. But we once again run into the issue of the mandate letter. This mandate letter makes sense for the housing minister, but what is like the Minister of Agriculture supposed to do with this? It's just a very stark reminder, this is a PR move. Next up, we have protecting Canadian sovereignty and keeping Canadians safe by strengthening the Canadian Armed Forces, securing our borders, and reinforcing law enforcement. And again, Carney talked about this during his election campaign. He wanted to add 1,000 CBSA officers and 1,000 RCMP officers. A cop in every pot. And same with military spending. It's not that surprising. Canada's been open about its plans to increase its spending to meet our 2% NATO commitment. So it's not a shock to see that in the mandate letters. But it does ring a bit hollow. It feels like we're getting into three-word slogan territory, which is Pierre Poilievre territory. Keeping Canadians safe, securing our borders, reinforcing law enforcement. Slogans are back, baby! That's how we're governing Canada these days. If it's 4 words, I don't want to hear it. Then we get off the rails a little bit. Quote, attracting the best talent in the world to help build our economy while returning our overall immigration rates to sustainable levels. And this is a little unsettling because it's essentially just shopping for people. It's saying we want immigration, but only good immigration from good people, none of the bad people. It ignores the ways that immigration has been used in Canada for years now. Immigration in Canada has largely been used as a source of cheap labor inputs, bringing in folks like temporary foreign workers in order to hold down labor costs for business. We've also brought in tons of international students to prop up Canadian universities with their tuition fees. But we're going to get rid of those, but we're going to bring in more educated immigrants. We're not really going to address the labor market issues we have here. We're not going to address our university funding issues. We're just going to import educated workers from other countries and hope for the best. And look, this is not a new problem. Canada has treated immigrants like economic inputs rather than human beings for a very long time. And Canada's been failing to meet the needs of its immigrants. But the problem isn't the number of immigrants. The problem is the lack of services to support the immigrants. And so if you're saying we're not going to build out those services, we're just going to bring in a very specific group of immigrants who we feel we economically benefit from the most, that's exploitative. It's not necessarily a bad thing to give our housing markets an opportunity to catch up, but that's not really what's happening here. It's just shopping for people. And last but not least, spending less on government operations so that Canadians can invest more in the people and businesses that will build the strongest economy in the G7. And this is a worrying one, because that is government austerity, plain and simple. This is Mark Carney loudly announcing that he is planning on cutting public services a lot. Of course, he's going to insist that you're going to turn that money around and spend it on people and businesses, and that will grow the economy, but what this really means is less public services creating more space for private profit. If we spend less on meeting your needs through public supports, then your needs will be unmet, and you'll need to spend money to get those needs met on your own, but without the economies of scale that the Canadian federal government can create. But what concerns me here is that Mark Carney has said nothing particularly specific about what public services or public spending he's going to cut. It's just sort of vague, we're going to spend less and invest more, but he won't really say what he means to do. And it's concerning because he's saying it out loud. He's going to significantly reduce the public service. So, who's going to lose their job? What services will be cut? Weird that that isn't included in the letter. We're just going to cut spending and don't worry about it. Ask no follow-up questions. And then Mark Carney wraps up the letter with a message to ministers, saying, quote, over the coming weeks, I will look to each of you to identify the key goals and measures of success on which to evaluate the results you will achieve for Canadians as a member of the ministry. Which is kind of giving away the game here. It's essentially saying that these mandate letters aren't really mandate letters. They're a PR document. They are meant to send a message to the public about what the priorities of the federal government are, and it's successful by that measure. The actual mandates for the different ministries are going to be given out behind closed doors or developed internally. This letter is largely just a PR document, and I think that's really important to bear in mind. But when you're looking at a PR document, you also need to look at what's getting left out. And I think it's worth noting what's excluded from this PR document. Because none of the 7 points that Mark Carney brought forward mention Indigenous people, people with disabilities, the marginalized, the unhoused. It is business-focused, economy-focused. It seems like Mark Carney is very focused on the big structural issues that are facing Canada and largely overlooking many of the issues that face individual Canadians or many of the most vulnerable groups in Canada. He's trying to make it clear that he's a big-picture guy. Unfortunately, being a big-picture guy tends to wind up leading to trickle-down economics, where they just hope to create strong economic conditions for businesses and hope that Canadians eventually just find a way to benefit from it. Fun fact about giving more money to businesses, they tend to keep it. Like if you're in Alberta, for example, there is a very strong chance that you work for an oil company who are making record historical profits and you are getting no cut. Because that's how this works. So a collection of mandate letters focused on business, efficiency, and the economy, and very little for ordinary Canadians, sends a pretty clear message about Mark Carney and where his priorities lie, and where they don't. Mark Carney's mandate letters show a very clear direction for the country. It's big on neoliberal economics, free markets, big business, and not a heck of a lot for you. Here's hoping that the actual individual mandates will be handed out behind closed doors and be a bit more focused on ordinary Canadians, but I remain skeptical. Mark Carney's focused on the big picture. Unfortunately, it's very hard to see individual Canadians that way. There are good things in these mandate letters, but there are also significant gaps, and I think we need to bear that in mind. Take care of yourselves, folks.
There's a flaw in a society whose economic ideology and goal is mass production and mass consumption. What are we doing? How long do we think? How is it even rational to create an economic system that isn't based on intelligent design, that isn't based on what we need and how we progress, that isn't based on innovation and awareness and progress of the future? It's based on making a bunch of crap so people buy a bunch of crap.
Hello, and welcome to the Politics Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. I don't know about you, but I am feeling overwhelmed lately. The Trump administration's plan to flood the zone with so many terrible things that we can't manage is proving to be very effective. And my job of being informed so I can sort through all of the things and bring you the most essential things has been hard. Work, yes, but also on my soul. And I imagine if you are paying attention, you often feel the same way. So today, instead of just focusing on the Republicans' terrible budget or the hateful immigration roundups or the importing of white supremacists from South Africa, that terrifying meetup of the world's worst leaders and the tech billionaires in Saudi Arabia, we are going to back it up, way up, to a 30,000-foot view and talk about two major ideas that I'm not sure we all understand as well as we could: capitalism and socialism. Of course, current events will still make an appearance, but if you want to fix something, it is best to know how it works. To help me do this, I have asked one of my favorite online creators to join me. A high school teacher IRL, Joanna Johnson's influence extends far beyond her classrooms. Under the handle of Unlearn16, Joanna uses humor and sarcasm to expand the knowledge of her well over 4 million followers on topics like prejudice, misinformation, and inequality through short-form videos, live streams, Q&As, and she is also the host of the incredibly popular podcast, Unlearn16 Class is in Session. She is also a fellow Canadian who knows far too much about America. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, teacher, social media superstar, and upcoming author of her first book, Joanna Johnson. Welcome, Joanna!
Thank you. Social media soup? Do I get a cape with the superstar?
Dude, you're like well over 4 million followers at this point, my friend. So yeah, superstar. Everyone loves you. I feel the need to buy a hat that I wear really high on my head just to like represent.
I'll send you one.
So can you imagine me in one? I would look
It'd be
so
good.
I'd be such a pick-me. That's so hilarious. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. You know, it's clearly there's a lot you and I could talk about. I've had the pleasure of doing your podcast, Unlearn16, Classes in Session, a number of times, and you and I can go off because we're both nerds, and we never really run out of topics because we like to talk about this stuff and it fires us up.
Absolutely.
But I'm having you on today because we want to take a broader look, right? Because I
right.
think people are kind of inundated with so much of the, flood the zone that they're overwhelmed. And so what I really want to do is look at this episode through the lens of capitalism and socialism, which are two concepts that I think are often misunderstood and miscategorized, but also because I think that you and I both agree that sometimes the best place to start to understand something is at the beginning.
Absolutely.
And we need to understand the sort of most basic principles if we want to start changing anything.
If we don't, I think, and it's great that we're starting here, because when you don't start here, when you don't have a fundamental understanding of language and the discourse used, it just gets weaponized. And these words get thrown out as aggressive stances and demonize these words. And people really, truly have a lot of the times no idea. And that's not because they're not intelligent. That's not because they're not capable of understanding it. It's because it's not their world, right? They're working at their job and with their families and trying to make sure everything works out. And meanwhile, we're throwing words, even words as basic as socialism or communism or fascism, and we're talking about habeas corpus. We're throwing Latin at them now.
I know, Latin now.
And they listen to people for the most part, and then they make such quick judgments because if you were to research everything, listen, I have a background. If I was to research everything I read, my head would explode. Like it really, truly would. So you kind of have to pick and choose, and having this basis, I think, is at least, the good start, so they can understand the beginning line.
Yeah, it also shows you the importance of having sources that you trust, because then you can let them do a lot of that pre-work for you. And that's sort of the shame of what happened with legacy media. We used to be able to trust our news was telling us the truth. And now we know that, especially down here in the US, our news is owned by one of 6 corporations, and they're telling us what best suits them.
You guys are also getting rid of like NPR and PBS, but
we're real geniuses down here right now. Jesus. Okay, so listen, I'm going to do a brief historical rundown just to situate people as to where we are, and then I will let you, the actual teacher, run.
Do you have a chalkboard?
No, I wish I did. Can you imagine me on a chalkboard? I would love it. Okay, so listen.
Yeah.
Let's start at the beginning, the American Revolution, right? The War of Independence. It was followed by the French.
1776.
Yeah, baby, wait for it. Okay, so the American Revolution, the War of Independence, it was followed by the French Revolution, where the French rose up against their own monarchs and aristocracy, calling for a greater rule of and by the people, right? After the French monarchy was overthrown, the French people did their own Declaration of Independence, which they called the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and that served as their constitution. Now, history tells us the main difference between the revolution in America and the revolution in France was the focus on freedom versus equality. Americans believed that freedom was the most important quality in their new government.
Yeah.
And the leaders in France, while believing in freedom, also believed that their government should work to assure some form of equality. And that was the liberty, equality, fraternity situation, right? So as the effect of the French Revolution began to spread across Europe, this idea of freedom and equality and brotherhood kind of changed the beliefs of citizens simply having equal rights under some form of democracy to the idea that the amount of wealth and property could potentially also be equal across society. And so this idea of financial equality, equality of opportunity, equality of class, was the central belief behind the birth of socialism, which then evolved into communism, which are 2 new theories that society got at the emergence of the 1800s. And I really want to point that out to people. Like, these didn't exist before the 1800s. Like, this is quite fascinating because I often think we need something new, and I'm going to carry on, but I don't think people realize we could start something new. We could create something new that doesn't have a name.
We didn't figure out life and we're like, we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Marxism had to happen after capitalism because Marx is inherently a critique of capitalism. So they have to go in tow. But yes.
Yes, that's the thing. So like communism was born out of socialism. You can't really understand socialism without understanding capitalism. Since we're looking at this through the lens of America, let's start with capitalism since that's how we kind of function, right? So just so people know, capitalism is an economic system where private individuals own and control their businesses, their property, their capital, what are called the means of production. The amount of goods and services that are produced are based on a system of supply and demand in which businesses try to manufacture quality products efficiently and inexpensively as possible so they can make the best profit, right? in its purest form, capitalism is called free market capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism, which is a French term that basically means hands off, right? Like, don't tell me what to do. The government's not going to tell me what to do with my business, right?
Yeah.
The Republicans favor laissez-faire capitalism because they want it to be completely unrestrained, right? They want the companies to be able to do whatever they want. No minimum wage, no unions, no OSHA requirements for the safety of your worker, no age requirements for your workers, right? No break requirements. This is the kind of thing we're actually seeing happen now. All these things that we had are being rolled back because they want more hands-off government for capitalism so you can make more of a product. So just, dump your toxic waste into the river, let your 13-year-old workers work overnight, 21 hours a day, to make a product that might or may not kill people, right? That's the kind of capitalism that they're looking at. But most capitalistic countries don't function like that. And for a long time, America didn't function like that because we had rules on it.
I don't know if there's a pure form of capitalism anywhere in the world.
Right, without any rules is what you're saying.
We have always had rules. We have always had a democratic form of socialism, which you're going to obviously get to, where there have always been some degree of government intervention because everybody understands that hands off, just like you described, ends up putting us into an absolute disaster of dog eat dog. And we all lose at the end of that game.
Yeah. And honestly, socialism was created in many ways as a response to this, right? They were like, how can we get to this part where the people from the top don't have everything? And so in some ways, it comes out to be, whether it's coming from the aristocracy or pure laissez-faire capitalism, we need some rules to make it more fair for everyone. Does that seem right so far?
Yeah. And I think the cool distinction here, because everybody loves to use this word too, the cool distinction is you're going to have every person for themselves in capitalism, and I'd even say every man for themselves, because let's be honest, they never wanted women in it anyways. And apparently trying to kick them out as we speak. And then socialism for me symbolizes, not perfectly, before everybody gets in their comment section, symbolizes the idea to achieve equity, not equality. That would be communism. And remember, we're always talking at this point about an economic theory, an economic application of what we should do. Because in all reality, capitalism and democracy, when we talk about political and economic ideologies, they've never gone properly hand in hand ever. In essence, I think they're very antithetical. I think the idea of a free market capitalism and then this ridiculous
For the second night consecutive, Ukraine launched a massive drone strike on many of the Russian facilities, including a very interesting part of the Russian military infrastructure, which was hit the last night. And today, the strike continues. In Orlov Oblast, the Russian Federation, there was the strike on a Russian semiconductor factory, which was producing a sensitive equipment for the Russian army.
Блядь, главное не к нам, пожалуйста.
Oh, why are they so sad? I mean, those Russians. It's just the drone flying. The special military operation is going totally according to plan.
8.
Oh. And yeah, we have the geolocation and confirmation that definitely drone hit that facility. And there was the fire, which was eliminated after a few hours.
Это просто жопа.
Yeah, indeed, это просто жопа. It is total arse. Well, Russians tried to intercept Ukrainian drones with their Panzer air defense systems. On this image, you may see the acceleration stage of the air defense missile, which was launched for sure. But as you understand, the precision of those missiles wasn't the best one, and drones hit their targets. Well, maybe not every drone, but indeed it was the successful Ukrainian attack, and also it was the response on the Russian strike on Ukrainian facilities. Because before it was very loud in Sumy, Kharkiv, and even Kiev, the capital city of Ukraine, and in the region where I used to live in Borispol district. Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's go. And it is happening already this evening in Russia. Also kind of loud. Well, this drone probably was intercepted, but Ukraine launched many more. Drones were spotted even in the Moscow region of the Russian Federation, so Russian aviation authorities had to close many of the civilian airports once again. And this is right now happening in Tula. Tula is the place for the biggest Russian ammunition factories, and you may see some of the ground kaboom there. Alright, and now let's go straight to the front lines review, because Russia wants to share the disinformation that they entered Dnipropetrovsk Oblast of Ukraine. De facto, no. Well, Russians published this kind of the drone image with them waving Russian flag near the vehicle which hit a reservoir, and they say that it's the border with Dnipropetrovsk. And they're saying that Russia demands 4 regions of Ukraine, and if Ukraine refuses to give those to Russia voluntarily, well, they may get the rest by force. You see how mighty Russian soldiers definitely are. Well, guys, it is actually not like that. Russian soldiers haven't yet entered Dnipropetrovsk region, and this photo was taken in Troitske. Yeah, if we check out the military map, you'll see that Troitske is on the way to the border with Dnipropetrovsk region, but still there's one more village on the way. Well, Russia is very close to Dnipropetrovsk region here and over here as well, but it doesn't mean that they'll capture the entire region the day after tomorrow. No, if the fights will ongo in Dnipropetrovsk region, it will just show the political pressure from Russia on Ukraine. From the military perspective, it doesn't mean absolutely anything. Those fields are exactly the same as in Donetsk Oblast, and Russia will continue to lose their forces as before. As, by the way, those Russian guys in Troitske who were taking pictures with the Russian flag, they were absolutely zeroed by Ukraine. And here we have the evidence, which I cannot show you fully here, but you may check out the Deep State military map source, and they have it on their social media. The price for that photo and bullshit information spread in internet are the lives of the Russian soldiers. That's exactly how the Russian army works, eliminating itself for really nothing. And you know, guys, I see more and more of that reservoir put on the front lines, mostly by Ukrainian side, so it definitely reminds the First World War, which was mainly stationary with lots of the reservoir and mines, plus trenches, obviously. Russians reported about the Ukrainian breakthrough of the sabotage groups actually towards the Bryansk region of Russia, the emergency state declared in Trubchevsky rayon of this oblast. And this is happening very close to the northern border of Ukraine between Sumy and Chernigiv region actually, so this is the Russian Bryansk Oblast, and you may see how big this forest really is, and partially it is going to Ukrainian side. So here's the border between two of the countries which Russia hesitates to respect. Well, in this case, Ukrainian sabotage groups may also disrespect the Russian side and intervene into their territory, just temporary, you know, to check out how the local Russian villages are doing, and maybe they want to form their local republic, People's Republic, who knows? Well, actually for now this operation is kind of limited, but it forces Russia to use their resources elsewhere, also in the Bryansk region, and believe me, it's very hard to find out our partisans in those forests, it's just huge. And here I want to share my thanks to the Patreon supporters and also members of my channel. Guys, you are doing a fantastic job keeping me running, filming almost every day. Just because of you, I'm here. And yeah, because we also have some of the sponsors of the channel as well, but mainly you keep me driving. And if you want to support the job that I do here, you may check out my personal link for the Patreon page. I'll put it right in description below. If not, guys, just press the like and subscribe for the channel, because that is how you also boost my video in algorithms. So thank you for that so much. So Russian official representative Lavrov, who is the Minister of the Russian Foreign Affairs, stated that there will be no ceasefire for ceasefire. No, they want again to eliminate the cause of the war, and for Russia the cause of the war is basically Ukrainian existence as the sovereign state. So Russia will not stop, the war itself will not stop, and it seems like American leader Donald Trump is taking fully Russian side. And guys, sorry, today in this video I'm gonna speak about this leader of the United States of America, if we may call him like that. Well, we have already some of the insights published by Bloomberg, because Bloomberg has direct access towards European officials and American ones, and they state that Trump is sure about the Russian current victory, that Russia is winning on the front lines and probably may win the entire war. Trump became sure about it after his conversation with Putin, and he told that stuff to European politicians after he finished the call with Putin. He also spoke about it with President Zelensky. That Ukraine is losing and Russia is winning. Yeah, we see how Russia is winning on the front lines. If they take the ground, it doesn't mean the victory. Because according to calculations, I already told you that Russia would need almost 2 centuries to conquer Ukraine fully with the pace of their attacks. And they would have to waste their entire population for this war. And it's just Ukraine, but ambitions for Putin are actually much larger compared to Ukraine. And probably we're going to speak about it also in this video. Secretary of State Marco Rubio already mentioned that the United States can no longer solve all world's problems. Yeah, we see that they cannot under Donald Trump's presidency. And about Marco Rubio personally, well, there was the conversation in Senate, and I guess it was the shame for entire United States of America. Let's listen to this conversation. I'll just expedite a little for you to be more comfortable with their speeches.
Vladimir Putin, is he a war criminal?
Well, I think you can look at instances that have happened there and certainly characterize them as war crimes, but our intent is to end the war.
Is he a war criminal?
We can't end the war without talking to Mr. Putin.
Is he a war criminal? They say about Putin. They speak about Putin, and just look how Rubio responds.
It's pretty simple. Is he a war criminal?
Well, that's
this man we're negotiating with, Vladimir Putin. Is he a war criminal? That's not tough.
What? I'm trying to answer your question by telling you that we're trying to end the war here.
Go ahead.
No,
You're
it's not a
equivocating.
simple answer.
You are equivocating, sir. Just answer the question.
I'm answering your question, and the answer is that war crimes have been committed, no doubt. And who's responsible for that? There will be time and place for that accountability. But right now, the job is to end the war.
So you won't answer
if we don't
the
end
question.
the war, people are going to get
reclaiming
killed.
my time, sir. Let me go on.
Russian dictator started the biggest war after the Second World War on territory of Europe, well, in general in the world, I would say. He occupied lots of the Ukrainian territories using military force. He kidnapped lots of the Ukrainian kids. He zeroed lots of the Ukrainian civilians, like hundreds of thousands. Well, more than 100,000 for sure since the beginning of the war, because many of people lost their lives in Mariupol, for example. Lots of the Ukrainians had to leave their homes, and Russia performed sabotage attacks even on territory of NATO and European Union, for example, Poland. Just recall the case with their shopping center. Plus, Russia uses the foreign military in their army, for example, North Koreans, to fight in Europe. And Rubio is damn deaf, blind, and speechless. But you know what Trump said to European allies after a conversation with Putin? That Putin wants peace. Putin freaking wants peace. Yeah, guys, when it looks like the bottom is already reached by Donald Trump and his dream team, they go deeper. And yeah, it was a total circus today in the Oval Office of the White House, where Donald Trump insisted for the meeting to be public, and he used it as his own PR, trying to show how superior he is relative to South African leader. He even accused South Africa of being racist towards whites. And yeah, there is the problem with racism in South Africa, but United States, they want to speculate on that topic. So Donald Trump shows some of the pictures, crime cases, not to resolve actually the problem, but to speculate about the problem openly in front of the press, in front of the president of South Africa, just to get some points of his falling rating from his nuclear electorate. It was a gameplay from Donald Trump, total disrespect to the foreign leader, despite him wearing the suit and despite him speaking English quite well. I guess English is the native language for South African leader. It was indeed very similar to the meeting between Trump and Zelensky in Oval Office a couple of months ago. Then Donald Trump bullied not his opponent, but his colleague, the president of the other country. But for Donald Trump, Ukraine, South Africa, they're not as powerful, as mighty as, for example, Russia or China. Imagine Donald Trump speaking like that if Chinese leader, for example, attends the Oval Office. Will Donald Trump show the pictures of hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs, yes, those are Chinese, who live in the western province of China, but they are mostly Muslims, and China detains those people in concentration camps, because China Communist Party doesn't like those. And yeah, you may show lots of those pictures about China, about Russia, but in case of the potential meeting between Donald Trump, Putin, and Xi, those dictators should be sure that they will not be mocked by Donald Trump. Because in Donald Trump's Sikh philosophy, only force and dictatorship matters. That is why he wants to build America like that. Americans, be aware, because this guy has just started to be a president of your country, and it goes to the cows day by day.
he's in South Africa. I said, what the hell is he doing in South Africa? He was talking to us? We got this one. That's a strange one. I said, what are you doing in South Africa? Yes. That's a strange one. He's trying to make peace. But we take...
So Zelensky, according to Donald Trump, has no right to go to the South Africa. By the time Ukraine actually purchases some of the coal from the South Africa to replace the lost one in the eastern side of Ukraine, because the South African coal is more or less suitable for Ukrainian power plants. Also, Zelensky is seeking for political cooperation from those countries as South Africa, because they actually have kind of the good relations with Russia after all. And Ukraine should use all kind of the levers to press on Russia, even speak with China. It's also the good step for Ukraine. But Donald Trump, he doesn't care. He's just this grown-up baby idiot.
And are you preparing to come? So without the United States, the G20, just like the G7, used to be the G8, but brilliantly they threw Russia out. It would have been a lot better if Russia was in. You know, a lot of people would say, oh, that's not it. Because if Russia was in, you probably wouldn't have this war.
Should I comment that? Trump desperately wants Russia to join G8, as he says, but Russia was excluded from G8 because they started the war in Ukraine from occupation of Crimea. So the war actually started a long time ago, more than 10 years ago already. Donald Trump, hello. So at first there was the war and then Russia was excluded. And according to Trump, Russia started this war because they were excluded from G8. What? Yeah, sorry, we have just Ukrainian subtitles here, guys. I was lazy bound to search for English ones, but we have the audio message. Hopefully you understood that Donald Trump is again a total buffoon, idiot. Yeah, people sometimes are saying, oh, Dennis, you use bad words against Trump. It means that you are not right. No, guys, I just don't know how else I can put my diagnosis of this person. And for me, it's surprised that he's a president at this high position, actually, of the president of the biggest economy, biggest military in the world. And you guys in America with majority, you elected this guy. Luckily, hopefully, you will elect the next president next time and will never repeat your mistake with majority voting, actually. I believe in you Americans that you will not do it again.
I think in terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
What happened, Elon Musk? Your investment doesn't work as you thought. Did something went wrong with your investments and company shares? Wow, what a surprise. And yeah, actually Elon Musk was presented today in the White House, but Donald Trump now tries not to speak about Elon Musk. Despite Elon Musk being presented on the meeting between South African and American president, even though Elon Musk is from South Africa, he was just a spectator like many others, watching without the right to say anything. So we see how this guy is losing or maybe already lost the influence in the Trump's team. Trump honestly doesn't like him. Otherwise, Trump would mention Elon Musk many of the times, but whom Donald Trump mentions every day? Crooked Joe Biden and rigged elections of 2020, because for Donald Trump it was a huge defeat. And yeah, Elon Musk has a great intellect, but at the same time he is an idiot. Yeah, it could be the same time. And about Qatari Boeing 747-8, which was presented to Donald Trump by Qatari royal family, well, congrats Qatar, you nailed it by humiliating Donald Trump and entire United States, because they accepted this present and on the way to convert this airplane into the Air Force One. Okay, great job, you just bribed the most powerful leader out there in the world. Besides, in this case, he's not that powerful after all. Guys, actually it's the shame.
Every one of them wants to return.
Because
They're
this
not
is
happy there.
ludicrous that you would say that children that have been kidnapped from their homes, homes that have been bombed, want to be with their kidnappers in return. This is actually one of the most insidious things I've
Guys, I highly recommend to watch this video made by Kellen Robertson, who went to Brussels to confront Fidias. Scam. This is total pro-Russian scam, which was debunked by a very powerful interviewer. Just for information, Fidias, being a member of parliament of the European Union, attended the Russian Moscow military parade. Just for information, Fidias, being the member of parliament from Cyprus in European Union, attended Russian Moscow parade. He claims that he did it himself using his own money, but No, I don't believe in that bullshit. And he constantly spreads just pro-Russian narratives, and he was debunked here on interview conducted by Colin Robertson, and he has wonderful channel on why not to subscribe. So guys, I also highly recommend to subscribe for this channel, because actually he is doing a very great job out there. I would like to do it myself, but obviously guy did it in the best way possible. He is really on the spot. He is in Ukraine and he's visiting front lines as well sometimes. Like for example, here it was his story with East Ukraine, day 1, day 2. He shows the reality, and then he went to confront pro-Russian politicians who built their career from being toilet YouTubers to become members of parliament, and probably getting millions of being Russian assets. I'm gonna put the link for the channel right in the video description below. Alright guys, now about European security. There is the major bill that was passed by European representatives. We're speaking about 150 billion euros that soon be at disposal of the member states. We're speaking about reinforcing the European security from what? From Russia. And I have something to say about the case. From one side, it is good, like the enormous sum of money out there for European Union to be used right away or not. Well, unfortunately, guys, everything in the European Union is very bureaucratic and very slow. And the most of the military contracts will start to work in 1-2 years and will bring some of the profit in 3-4 years up to 5 years. They call it Defense Project 2030, but I guess Europe doesn't have the time. Plus 150 billion is not enough. Russia spends the same amount of money every year for their own army. And we are not even speaking about the support which is coming from North Korea. Yeah, we were making fun of that country, North Korea, with this cringy fatty dictator, but they supplied to Russia, as estimate, 8 million artillery shells. It's way more compared to what Ukraine obtained from European Union and I guess United States altogether. It means that economy power and how good people live doesn't equal the military power, because in North Korea, in Russia, the level of poverty is really high compared to European Union, but those countries are more prepared for the war actually. And if United States is not willing to protect Europe, and they're not willing, believe me, if Russia attacks Baltic countries, the United States will not nuke Moscow or something like that. No, Donald Trump will just say, oh, it's bad action from Putin, it is Putin's mistake, but you know, United States will not interfere. And all of that happened because of the Baltic countries themselves. You know, they support the previous White House administration. He would say something like that, but he will totally exit the support. In the best case, sending some of the javelins, and later on telling that how good he really is by sending those to support Baltic countries. It is not just 100%, it is more than 100, and Putin understands that. So now it's the green light for him actually to use his military in Europe. And the only reason why Russia is not interfering into Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia is because Russian army is way busy in Ukraine. So Ukraine in a way is like this huge shield for European security, and that's why for Europe it's very important to support Ukraine continue it. It is already understandable after multiple of the escalations from the Russian side in the Baltic Sea. And I think lately that Putin might decide to perform the act of aggression against those